This is a practice video for my TKGA Next Level Knitting Conference 2024, but it's also specifically for my Woolgatherers Knitting Guild friends who helped me design the presentation, gave me fantastic feedback, and I want you to see the final product, even if you're not able to join the conference today. So I'm going to do it just as I would do in the conference. Welcome, and thank you for being here at the conference and with me in this session. First, I'd like to introduce Mary Brandow, my dear friend, who's facilitating the session today. She's going to tell you how she's going to handle questions and the survey. Thank you, Mary. I'm Cherie Cornick, a TKGA certified master hand knitter who loves to do stranded knitting, especially Fair Isle. I've knit a few stranded sweaters, many hats, some gloves, and during the pandemic, I started teaching classes on Zoom. Today, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned about fixing my mistakes as I'm doing stranded knitting. In addition, I'm going to show you how I fix the holes in the elbows of my favorite Fair Isle sweater. Although my examples are mostly Fair Isle patterns and on woolen yarn, you can use these techniques with any stranded knitting. In the class handout I've given you are some key points that I'm going to talk about and demonstrate. It's designed for reference rather than following along. I've also included a chart that I used for demonstrating the techniques and you might use for practice. One of the charts is a corrected pattern. It's a correct pattern. And the other, I charted mistakes. You might want to knit the mistakes chart and then fix the mistakes as you watch a recording. When you're finished with corrections, then you could use this completed swatch to practice replacing a section of knitting as you would a worn spot. The last thing on the handout are some video and text references that might be helpful to you with your stranded knitting. As I prepared this presentation, I realized that I had more to explain and show than the time will allow. To solve this problem, I'm going to use explanations and short videos. You can watch full videos on my YouTube channel. In addition, I'm going to have a breakout session following the presentation where you can ask live questions. So let me go to my screen here. Fixing mistakes is always a problem-solving process. You probably already know some of the things that I'm going to show you, and you may have attended a session on fixing mistakes or on stranded knitting. My goal is to give you additional things to consider that are unique to stranded knitting. To do that, I'm going to provide you with strategies, examples, and demonstrations for dropped, split, and run color stitches. And I'm going to show how worn sections of your favorite knitwear can be replaced. You might want to have handy when you're doing stranded knitting some of these tools. The Susan Bates handy tool is one that I particularly like. And although it says cable needle there, I really mean a smaller circular needle. That Susan Bates handy tool is one that I keep all around the house, any place I might be sitting and knitting, because it helps me to tear things out, and it also helps pick up stitches that might have been dropped. The first thing that many people think about when fixing a color mistake is to do the duplicate stitch. And although, and it's a perfect way to fix a mistake that is far back in your knitting or in a finished piece. To duplicate stitch, and this is the stitch I'm going to pretend is not the right color. So this is the one we're going to duplicate stitch over in another color. You come up with your new yarn at the base of the stitch, go underneath the legs of the stitch above it, just like I have done here. This yarn is already, there's the yarn in place, the first piece. It's underneath those legs. It's coming out here, and now my needle is ready to go down at the base of the stitch again. And there it is, finished. Sometimes it covers completely. Sometimes you have to play with it a bit. If you'd like to see a video on doing duplicate stitch, look at my YouTube channel. Laddering down and crocheting back up is used for a fix whether it's in the row before or a number of rows down. You could use this technique if you have a drop stitch, stitches of the wrong color, or a split stitch. It's done like you would in solid color knitting, but with stranded knitting, you have to carefully watch the chart to make sure you're crocheting up the right color. Every row has 2 or more colors that are stranded behind it. Now let's look at fixing a split stitch that's several rows down. There are no color mistakes in this one, so you can use the yarn that was used before. I have a split stitch on this swatch that I'm going to fix. Can you see it right there? It's standing up above the rest of the fabric. That stitch is this one right here in the chart. It's right next to the long blue column. And you can see that above it, it has 3 white stitches and 2 light blue stitches. So I've knit to the point that stitch is below. I'm using my tool, my handy tool, to pull out the stitches. Until I get to that plum colored stitch. There it is. Now insert my hook. Yep, I have the whole stitch. And crochet it up. That was the stitch right there. There are 3 white ones and then 2 light blues. And you can see them right here. There's 1, 2, 3, and 2 light blues. When you don't have to change the color, it's very easy to pick up the ones that you just laddered down and then crochet them up. Sometimes you need to do a little. In this corrugated ribbing, I have 2 stitches on the left needle that should be pink instead of light green. Can you see them there? What I'm going to do is use the float behind those stitches to fix them. Can you see the float there? This works well when you have 1 or 2 stitches that are the wrong color. So just take out that stitch, put your hook in, go to the back, find that ladder that's the correct color, and pull it through. That's the first one fixed. Same thing with the second stitch. Take it off, pull it out. But this time, the float's not as long. You can find it there. Grab a hold of it. This float, the stitch is going to be tighter and the float's going to be tighter since we had to make 2 stitches out of that float, but it will still work. See how, but get that green out of there from the previous mistake stitches. All right, now that the 2 stitches are fixed, let's see what to do with that float from the previous mistake. There it is. You can put your hook right underneath those floats, grab it, pull it down. It'll be out of the way and no problem. There, it's fixed. Here, my mistake is that I have in the corrugated ribbing example, the float used to fix could be used to fix the 2-color stitch error. But sometimes a float isn't long enough to handle the number of stitches to be changed. So let's take a look at this video where there are more stitches that are in the wrong color. 4 blue stitches right here that should be white. Let me just zoom in a little bit so that you can see what that correction should be. There's the white stitches, it should be. And instead, I have a blue one, that's correct, white, blue, and then I have 4 blue stitches before a white and a blue. So it's these 4 stitches that I need to replace with white. But as you can see on the back, that white strand is never going to accommodate 4 more stitches. So instead, what I'm going to do is add another piece of yarn. I'm going to do this by laddering down each stitch, since there are only 4 of them. Start here. And I do this 1 stitch at a time to help maintain the tension and to keep things in order. So there's the first offending blue stitch right here. You can see there's my blue, white, blue, and now this one should be white. I'll take out the blue one. I'm going to pull that to the back. going to give myself plenty of space here. Plenty of yarn, so that, because this end is going to have to be woven in at the end. I'll go back here to my white stitch. Now the stitch after this one, after this white one is a blue one, that's right there. I need to make sure that I go back to the back and get my white stitch below that. So I'm going to go to the back, get my white yarn, pull it through to the front and through that stitch. All right, now the next stitch above that is I have a blue, a white, and two dark blues. So there's the blue, the white, one dark blue, two dark blues. And I'll put that on my needle. Same thing for the next one. Take out each of the stitches. Here I have, the second one, I have two light blues, a medium blue, and a white above the white that has to be inserted. Right, there's the white above my inserted white stitch. There's the white above it right there. This is the blue that's wrong. I'm going to take that out and pull it to the back. So here's, and below this stitch, I have a red one. So my hook goes into the red stitch. I have to make sure that my hook goes to the back below this white stitch, which will be the next one. Grab that white yarn, pull it through. Now, this white stitch, this last one that I fixed here, looks like it needs a tension adjusted a little. There we are. So the front looks good. Sometimes you have to adjust the row below it too, because that's been stretched out a little. Let's look at the back. On the back, we have two things to deal with. One is these two ends that need to be woven in. And the other is this blue right here. That loop isn't really long enough to give me two pieces that I could cross and weave in here. So instead, I'm just going to pull that down into these floats. It will stay there and it'll be just fine. Now you might have looked at this and said, wait a minute, this doesn't look like it's coming out far enough. And what I think I did is I think I used the tail for one of these stitches. But there's no problem with the stitches and there's no problem with that. So I'm just going to weave that in here and weave this one in this direction. All right, do we have any questions? Then let's go on to more substantial mistakes. If a mistake is more substantial, where you made the same mistake in every multiple pattern in the round on a hat or a sweater, you might have to rip out the entire row. In that case, a lifeline is needed. In solid color knitting, it's easy. You just have one yarn, you pull it out, and you can do that row after row. The remaining stitches stand up nicely, and you can put them back on the needle. In stranded knitting, Every row has two colors to pull out. They should come out together, but sometimes one color gets ahead of the other. Then it's hard to tell which row you're on. In that case, a lifeline is really helpful. It holds the correct row stitches in place as you unravel the yarn that wants to stick together. I don't insert lifelines periodically as I would do with lace. Here I insert a lifeline right where I know I'm going to need it, just below the mistake. I insert a tapestry needle with tightly spun crochet cotton or yarn, or a smaller circular needle into the right leg of each stitch in the row below the mistake. If I'm using a circular needle as a lifeline, I can knit right off it while I'm fixing the error. If the mistake is smaller, such as in one pattern multiple, you might insert a lifeline just below that section. Let's watch how I'm using a lifeline in fixing a larger mistake area. Here we have a problem that's much bigger than the other ones. Take a look at what you can see in this part of the knitting and what it should look like up here. I've identified the space on the chart of these black lines that needs to be fixed. So we're going to start right here with this row of dark blue and light blue. And this time I'm going to take out all of these stitches, insert a life. Here we have a problem that's much bigger than the other ones. Take a look at what you can see in this part of the knitting and what it should look like up here. I've identified the space on the chart of these black lines that needs to be fixed. So we're going to start right here with this row of dark blue and light blue. And this time I'm going to take out all of these stitches, insert a lifeline first, then take out all of those stitches and then knit it back up with the yarn that we have left. So the pins here are to just show you what level it's going from. At the top here, you can see that on my needle, between the pins is the dark blue, light blue, three blue, dark blues, light blue, three darks, a light, and a dark. So those stitches are just going to come off this needle. I'll leave it here in a resting position. And notice as I take out these rows, each row has two strands of yarn, one for each of the colors. So there's the first row, and I'm going to clip those two strands together with a locking stitch marker. The next row. Oops, I forgot to put in my lifeline. So I want to put in the lifeline in the row that is below the one I'm going to take out. So that will be in this white and blue row. And I'm picking up the left leg or the right leg of each stitch in that row. This lifeline will actually be the stitches that I am knitting up with the first correct row. Now be careful that you stay on the right row. There it looks like I'm going up to a row above, and no, it needs to be in this row. Keep watching your chart. Make sure you stay in the appropriate row, and then check afterwards to make sure it still matches the chart. So my chart says that the row for the lifeline, this one, should start with a white stitch, have a blue, 3 whites, there they are, a blue, 3 whites, right there, a blue, and 1 white. I have my needle in 1 stitch too far, so I'm just going to back it up. All right, that last pair of strands is caught with a marker. I'll do the same with this. I want to make sure I'm pulled it out all the way to the stitches that are secured here in this column, and all the way in this direction. All right, I have another row to go. Make sure that I get both yarns there, the light blue and the dark blue. And secure them. All right, this is the row. Here we have a problem that's it's being held by this purple. I want to get all the rest of the way back here and only pay attention to these two. I'm going to put them over my finger. Knitting in a case like this is always done as a right side row. And that's why double point needles are good, because you can just slide them down to the end. So I have a dark stitch above this white one, and then a light blue. Dark is my background color, so I'm going to keep it on the right. And my pattern color, the light blue, on the left. So I have a dark blue stitch, a light blue stitch, 2 darks, I want that background color to go over the pattern color. Two darks. You see how I'm doing? A light blue that's right above white. Dark blue, it's right here in the middle. A light blue right there. Of that white. 2 dark blues. Oh, this is getting a little tight here. So when that happens, I often put it right over my needle and then just slip the stitch over. Let me see what's happened with this needle from up there. Okay, so there are my 2 dark blues. I have a light blue and another dark blue. It's like the go. Right here it is. Dark blue and this, that light blue, and then this dark blue is a stitch right here. Can you see that float right there? Well, all I'm going to do is put it over my needle and lift this stitch over the top. So there it is. Let's check it. Dark blue, light blue, 2 darks, a light, a dark, a light, 2 darks, a light, and a dark. I slip the stitches to the other end of the needle. Look for, now, do you see this piece I have right here? This piece is the extra that I had from the way it was knit before. I'm going to take this and hold it out of the way for the time being. I'm going to just lay it down on my, like that, put a locking stitch marker to hold it down there. I'm going to bury it later in these ends or weave it in, but right now I just want it out of the way. Okay, the next one, the next pair that I have looks like this pair right here. Ooh, they weren't held together, but still, I can see that they are a pair. The next pair would be those two. So yes, it's these two that I want. Again, I'm going to put them over my finger as if I'm knitting continental. And look at the next line. I have a dark blue, a light blue, 2 darks, and a light. Blue, a light blue. Now, I'm knitting this up with needles that are smaller than the ones that I knit the piece to begin with. And I'm doing that because it's easier to make use of the yarn that I have if I actually have a little bit of slack, and I can go back at the end and manipulate stitches that don't look like they're the right size. Well, there's a little trick. Do you see now how I put that needle over the top of the blue one so I could get the dark blue better? That seemed to work well. Okay, the light blue, that one's going to come from underneath. Okay, light blue, 2 darks. I'm going to try that again. Just put that needle right over there. Okay, 2 darks. Whatever you can do to help yourself deal with these small numbers, the small amount of yarn you have when you get to the end. So I have a light blue and a dark blue to do. A light blue, just put that right over the tip of the needle. And a dark blue, there's the dark blue piece. So each row is worked up in the same way, using the strand, the 2 strands that were used to knit that row. Here's the next pair. I'm going to knit up to the top. And you don't need to be watching me do that, and then show you the last row as I put it onto the stitches to continue on. You can see already that it looks much better. It's following the pattern. And every time I want to make sure that I check that I have the right stitches there. So in summary, when you're ripping back and knitting up, insert a double point needle as a lifeline to knit off. Use a needle that's 1 or 2 sizes smaller than you did for the project. Rip back to the correct row, watch the chart carefully, identify the 2 strands for each row, use the correct strands to knit up, and knit all as right side rows as you would if you're knitting in the round. Now I mentioned drop stitches before. And if the drop stitch is 1 or 2 rounds back, it's easy to just crochet it back up using the correct color of floats that are between the existing stitches. But if the drop stitch is further back and rounds have been knit without that stitch in place, then I'd suggest you use a technique like I just showed. Rip back 2 or 3 stitches on each side of the drop stitch. Knit all the stitches back using the existing yarn, just as is in this color mistake. And then the yarn will be spread around among all of the stitches and they'll be even. So do we have some more questions? All right, so I'm answering questions here. It's just going to take me a second to get this new presentation in place. All right, so now let's go on to fixing some of your knitting that may have worn out. There's a picture of the elbow that I fixed, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I'm wearing my favorite Fair Isle sweater, and as I noticed that the cuffs began to wear out, I was really glad that I had saved yarn from this sweater. So my number one recommendation to you when knitting a garment that you could possibly need to fix at some point is to save and label the yarn. And I'd suggest the chart as well. Got to go back to sharing my screen. And starting the presentation. There we go. All right. So save and label your yarn. If your sweater, like mine, has the sleeve knit from the top down, it's a really easy fix. All you have to do is unravel the worn part, reknit, and bind it off. Actually, I did this twice on this sweater, and the second time I bound it off with a double strand, which looks like it's wearing better. However, if you have a bottom-up sleeve, then it's going to be a little bit different process. Put a lifeline in above the worn cuff, just above a solid knit row if it's possible. Cut off the cuff below the lifeline. Knit a new cuff separate from the sleeve and a new cuff from the bottom up, and then graft that new cuff to the round that's held on the lifeline. Now I said, put that lifeline just above a solid row if possible, because if the graft row will create a new row of knitting. And if you're doing it where you had a solid row, then it's pretty easy. You're just grafting with one color, and you're grafting in your usual stockinette type of row. But if you have to do it in multiple colors, then you're going to see later on in this presentation how to graft in two colors. However, I'm not going to tell you how to graft in pattern. So think about that. This is the hole that I got in my elbow. I knit this sweater. It was my first Fair Isle sweater, and it was my own design. So I'm really proud of it. And I knit it in 2010. In 2019, I found a hole in this elbow and a soon to be hole in the other elbow. So I asked around, I looked around. I asked my friends, how did they know any reference that I could use for fixing this kind of mistake? Well, some of them suggested leather patches and others suggested decorative darning, but neither of those seemed to fit my situation. And as you can see, the worn parts of this are, look at how narrow that is. Look at how narrow this, and how much thicker the yarns are over here in the undamaged yarn. So I needed to fix from here all the way around there. Well, I looked at my books. I looked at TKGA's references. I looked on the internet. And what I finally found was a workshop offered by Interweave, done by Jennifer Raymond, called Darn It, Fix Your Knitting or Fix Your Knitwear, something like that. I ordered it because it specifically said that it was about fixing Fair Isle. That was one of the things that was included. And can you see where I fixed it? Those are the two elbows. Those are the fixes. I was proud of the job that I did. And let me show you how I went about doing that. The first thing you have to do is prepare the worn section. On the sweater, identify where the undamaged yarn begins, just like I did back there in this picture. You see, I've got a marker there because this is still worn, damaged yarn. And it's damaged right up to this row. That row looks good. Here, this all looks damaged. This looks good. So I'm going to have to repair this whole section. Well, once it's identified, outline that rectangle to be replaced, like I've done in this picture. Then you're not going to want to tackle your beloved sweater without practicing this first. So knit a block and block a swatch with the same pattern that you need to repair and the same rectangle outlined. Also, on a chart, outline that rectangle that's going to have to be replaced. Once you have this on your swatch, use a tapestry needle and smooth yarn to put lifelines in. You want a lifeline in the row before the top outline and a lifeline below the lower outline. Then you can remove the outline stitches. The lifelines are going to be your determiner. but don't take out the sides because you still want to identify where you're going on either side of it. So there you have your stitches on lifelines. And the next thing to do is to separate that worn section from the undamaged section. As you can see in this picture, I have separated the top part. The bottom part is still attached. So let's watch this video that shows separating the bottom part and opening up that rectangle. That's the top separated. And we'll do the same thing for the bottom. Remember, not cutting anything that's on a lifeline. I want to cut the colors that are above that lifeline. So I'm going to cut a light blue and a dark blue. I cut them in the middle because these ends will have to be woven in later. And if I cut it too close to one edge, I won't have anything to weave in. So this light blue here is the last one. Oh, I didn't get it out from this stitch right there. It's the last stitch to be taken out. This is my line for where I have the undamaged stitches. Right, those go to the back. And this side. This one doesn't come. Don't come. Ah. Now I have to be careful when I'm doing this because I couldn't figure out why the stitches weren't coming out, but I was actually trying to pull out my lifeline, the stitches on the lifeline. So here's what I'm pulling out. All the stitches are still good on the lifeline. Here's my light. And the last one here, again, is, you can see this is my line for the separation of the strong stitches or the undamaged yarn. And this one right here, and you see it connected right there? I have to make sure that that one comes out as well. I think. Yes. And these go to the back. Notice right here that this is a problem. This is one of the problems with working with stranded knitting. You can see the floats here on the upper sections. And these are the ones that are going to be held together by some removable stitch markers. So this section right here is all the damaged yarn. I'm going to cut this right down the center. Again, I want the center so I'll have those pieces that can be woven into strong yarn. Right. And these pieces will be folded back. This is the section that is going to be replaced. That's the top. So in summary, we insert a lifeline above and below the outline in the strong yarn stitches, cut and remove the row below the top lifeline and above the bottom lifeline, and cut the worn section to be replaced in the center and fold back the stitches. So questions? Now that the space is ready, insert a double point needle into the stitches being held on that bottom lifeline. Using the same technique as for fixing the large mistake and following the chart, and knit each row. This is the easy part, so I'm not going to show a video. The only difference between this and the video of fixing a large mistake is that you're using new yarn for every row and aren't constrained by the length of the yarn that's available. Make sure that you leave 3 or 4 inches of yarn at the beginning and at the end of each row to be woven in. Leave them hanging out to the front. For this knitting up this section, use the same size needles as you would for the original garment. A suggestion that I have that I did not do myself was that you might want to loosely tie together each one of those pairs of yarn at the beginning of the end, and it may save you some problems at the end when you've got all those ends that need to be woven, need to be duplicate stitched. If you watch some of the videos that I'm doing, you'll see how much time I spend trying to find the right yarns for each row. I'm going to let's watch this video as I use a duplicate stitch. Once that knitting is finished, and you can see it there, that's the piece that's knit all the way up to the top, except for the last row to be replaced, because that's going to be graphed. The next step is to join that piece to the sides. Right now, it's just hanging separate, and we need to join it to the existing sweater. I'm taking out the needle because I don't want it to be flipping around here while I'm trying to get these things nice and the tension good. One of the things I have to be careful of, though, is that I don't pull these stitches too tight. All right. Now I'm going to start right down here at the bottom right corner. Get all of my ends untangled. Got to have all of these ends on this side to the front. There's
this end, this end belongs to that row that I took out, so that's not an important one. This one needs to go to the front. All right, I'm starting with the very first row here. That was this row where I had one light blue, and then on the other side of the divide, I have a dark blue and a light blue. So I'm going to take the dark blue from this row right here. And I'm going to duplicate stitch it over this dark blue stitch. Let me zoom in on that just a little bit. So this is the row that I'm fixing. These are the two colors from the first row I fixed. I'm going to duplicate stitch this dark blue stitch by going into the underside, right into here.
As you can see, going under the legs of the stitch above. And now back in the base of that blue stitch.
Tension looks good on these stitches here. I'm going to come down here. I don't want to go through, I don't want to get into this tab in the back. And I'm going to bring this end out way down here. I just want this out of the way for right now. I know I'm finished with that. It's out of the way. And I can go on to the next. Now, this is the light blue one that's in that row. I'm going to make sure that the tension looks good on it. I'm going to duplicate stitch this one over this stitch, this light blue stitch. So this is the light blue stitch. I'm going to duplicate stitch it over. Go over here. This stitch. Here again, making sure I'm not going through this tab. And I'm going to bring it out just about the same place. So that's the first row of stitches of ends woven in. But I'm going to have to release this because I don't want to stitch into it. So I'm going to have to be watching that on the back side. Anyway, this one is going to get buried right here on this blue stitch. We have the blue here, light blue, dark blue, light blue. So this blue is going to get buried on that stitch. I'm going to bury these ends all the way up one side. Oh, let me just do this one. Point. So it's going to come over here.
At the base of the stitch.
I don't want to go
on the back side to the base of the stitch.
I'm going to come right here. Make sure that my tension is good. Make sure that I have in this line light blue, dark blue. This is the light blue I'm going to duplicate stitch into. Get my
And-
tab out of the way underneath.
under the two legs of the stitch above. And now back down at the base of the stitch to
Take it
being
down.
duplicate stitched.
That looks good. And I'm going to bring it out over here. This is only 2 rows so far, but you can see, I'm going to fold this tab back again so you can see where the line of stitching is. But you can see I've joined those two. The next one will be right here. Where these stitches will be duplicate stitched over that one. As I go up, I make sure that my stitches are matching up and that I'm following the chart. So I'm going to go all the way up this side doing that. Then I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. Making sure that all of these stitches match this side of the chart. Zoom out. Making sure that all of these stitches match this side of the chart. When I'm finished with that, I'm going to do the grafting with the 2 colors in pattern.
So there we have my original sleeve in progress. You can see that I left double point needles in there. I would not do that in the future. I think the stitches on the lifeline make it much easier to handle. On the right, the duplicate stitching has been done. The ends are strung out here so that they can be woven in later. And they're not on the back where they would just get tangled up with other things. I'm ready to do the duplicate stitching on this side. So as I mentioned about the removable stitch markers, I think one of the most valuable things that I took away from Jennifer Raymond's presentation was this idea of using removable stitch markers to hold the stitches on the top part of the graft. So I'm just going to play a little bit, as you can see how I put those removable stitch markers in place. Look right here. This is showing you that these are the 2 floats that go to make that blue stitch. So I'm using a removable stitch marker to connect those 2 legs. And I pull it down, make sure that it looks like it's making a V. Make sure that it looks like it's a stitch that goes right up that column of stitches. It seems to be easier for me to put the markers in these light blue ones first. They have such long floats and that aren't next to each other. So I'll get those in place and then come back and do the dark blue ones. Remember that the 2 legs of each stitch are going to be the same color. I mean, think that probably sounds ridiculous, but when you're talking about stitches next to each other, and that's one of the issues with the floats, it's not about connecting to the stitches next to each other. It's the 2 legs of the same color that make that stitch that need to be held together. All right, so we have the light blue done. Now let's take a look at the dark blue. I got to use this marker, this removable stitch marker, to pick up the right leg of the first dark blue stitch and the left leg. You can see the right leg is the forefront of that waste yarn, but it's not easy to do while it's on the waste yarn. So take it off, put your marker into the right leg right there, and the left leg is still on the waste yarn. So get it in place, pull it down, make sure that those are the two legs of that stitch. And you don't have the waste yarn connected. Yep, two legs of that stitch. Now, if you remember in doing grafting, you have to go through each stitch twice. Well, what's going to happen is you also have to go through each loop of this yarn twice. So this, the right leg of the next stitch, is actually in the same loop as the left leg of the previous stitch. Take out that yarn and see, same loop there is going to make the right leg of that stitch, and the left leg is still on the waste yarn. I don't skip this part of pull it down, make sure that those are the right legs because it's going to be crucial when you're doing the graft. All right, let's just do one more marker there. Again, you're going into the same loop that that left leg was in, and then, and now it's the right leg and the left leg. See how the two of them come right together there, right along that, you can see that column of stitches. So you just continue going all the way across the top of this. And if you want to watch every single one, as I said, the whole video is on my YouTube channel. All right, let's go on and take a look at grafting in two colors. Probably the grafting that you have done was in the toe of a sock, and you're using just one color where you've knit both parts of the sock, the front and the back of the sock up, and now you're going to use the tail to graft those two together. This grafting is done a little bit differently, and as I said, with two colors. So let's watch this video and see how it's done. We also tend to graft off of needles. So this one has no needles.
I am doing a Kitchener graft between this section that is like a worn section that I'm repairing on this swatch, and the section up here that would be undamaged. I need to do this in two colors because, as you know, a graft creates a row of stitching, a row of knitting. And that's what I'm going to be doing. Now in a solid color, it's no problem. You're just creating another row of the same thing. But here, that's not the case. Here, I have to make sure that I'm using two colors to do this grafting, and that I'm using the right colors in the right place. So the stitches that are up here that are being held by these removable stitch markers, this is that stitch. The next one, there are 4 dark blues there. Those are being held, and they are the stitches that are in this row. The stitches that I'm connecting to are the ones in this row. As you can see, the first one I'm connecting to is white. It's white on the bottom here, it's dark blue on the top, and I'm using a medium blue thread. I've strung about 2 feet on each one of these, but the white, I made this one a yard long because look at how much more white there is than blue. This needs to be at least, your yarn needs to be at least 3 times this distance that you're going to be filling in. And I'm going with more because more is better. All right, so for the first stitch, remember in a graft, you always have to go through every stitch twice. So here's the first stitch. I'm going to take my lifeline out of it. And I'm going to come into this stitch from the back. If you want to think about, and I'm going to leave the tails on the front so that they're easy to deal with. I can always put them in the back. And now I'm going to connect it to the stitch that's right here on this marker. I'm going to go into the first leg and into the second leg, just like that pin is holding them together. Take it out and pull my yarn through. Now I have to go into this one again, but the next stitch is going to be white. So I'm going to go into this white one. Here's the first stitch that I've created. That one right there. I'm just going to lay my needle and yarn over to the side. Now I have to have the white yarn. Again, I'm going to leave a good sized tail. Remember, I've got to weave this in the end. And this is going to go through this blue stitch and connect to this dark blue stitch. So I'm going to go into the blue stitch from behind. Keep those tails out there. I'm going to go into that blue stitch. Now I'm going to come up here to the second of my dark blue stitches. And I'm going to go through both legs of it. The first leg and the second leg, just like the marker is holding it. I'll take that marker out. Pull my yarn through. Now come back to this lower stitch, and now I have to go into that from the front. I'm not going to pull it through yet because my next stitch is also white. So I'm going to go into the next blue stitch from behind. Or as we might say, if we were doing this on the needles in our ordinary way, as if to purl. Tighten it a bit. All right, that's my first white stitch. Now, I wanted to leave this out to the front, but this is going to be a problem because if I leave it out to the front, and when I go to do the next blue one, look what's going to happen. It's going to go into across it, so I can't. I'm going to take that to the back and leave it hanging out here. But it needs to be in the back. Right, so I came through this stitch. I'm ready to make my second white stitch. I have a blue stitch here, one white stitch, I'll take out this lifeline, and I have to go through the next marker up here. Goes right through there. Back down to this white stitch. I'm going into it from the front. This is my second that I'm creating, and now I'm working on getting ready for the third one. So I'm going to go into that white stitch from the back.
So that continues on, just exactly the same way, going from the back of the bottom stitch through the legs being held by the marker and down from the front of into the bottom stitch and then into the next one. So again, you can see more of that in the videos if you want to see more of the grafting. After the grafting is complete, you can see right here, there's the graft row. Manipulate the stitches a little bit if they need it, but it's finished. Now on the back, we still have the ends to weave in. You can see that on the left, there's the tab that I cut, but on the right, that tab has been raveled, and the ends are being spread out and kind of raised. You could wet those if you wanted and get them to smooth out a little bit, but there's no real need to. You're going to just flip those underneath the floats and weave them into the center part of the repair. If you put your hands over it, as I'm doing right there, you'll see that where it's been unraveled, it's a lot smoother and flatter than it is if you were to leave those tabs just hanging on there. In addition to the tabs, we have these ends that were used to duplicate stitch, and those were all taken to the back and then pulled up to the front. So now we want to pull them back to the back and weave those ends in. It seems like a tremendous number of ends to weave in, but I don't put them onto a tapestry needle. Instead, use my hook and pull them under the floats. And I can even do a couple of them at a time. They'll stay there. They don't need any more weaving in, but if you're not comfortable with that, if you feel you need a little more security, then just try turning your work and weaving them in the other direction and then clipping it off. All the old yarn gets woven into the center and all of the ends from the new piece are going to be woven away from the center. So that's the new stuff. It's coming in from the right and it's going to be woven out. So that one will be unraveled, all those woven in. And actually it makes another layer of fabric, so gives you even more strength in that elbow than you had before. So there it is, all finished. Looks perfect. And here's the finished repair on my elbows. Again, I'll say, can you find the repairs? Actually, I can't. I can find them when I feel the thickness and where it is, but that's where they were repaired. So, do we have any more questions? Remember that if we don't get to your questions right now, I'll be available in after this session in a breakout room. And as I said, you can watch the videos on my YouTube channel in excruciating details. You might want to speed them up a little bit. Give me a minute to get to the breakout room because I need to sign into Broa. So thank you for being here. Here's my contact information. I hope you've been able to find something in this presentation that you can use to help you in your knitting. Enjoy fixing instead of ripping and keep wearing your favorites.